This is the BBC.
This podcast is supported by advertising outside the UK.
Strike!
Tell me something I don't know, Ump.
Well, unlike that nasty curveball, there aren't any surprises when you finance your next car with Carvana. You get real terms personalized for you right in your strike zone.
Really?
Steer-right!
How am I supposed to focus when you're telling me about Carvana?
Well, Slugger, you gotta keep your eye on the ball. Just like you can keep an eye on your customized down and monthly car payments.
I can customize those?
He's out and on his way to finance his next car with Carvana.
Visit Carvana.com or download the app to get pre-qualified today. We'll drive you happy at Carvana.
In this episode of the food programme, we explore everything there is to know about wedding food, and there is a lot. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Sit wherever you like, introduce yourselves to whoever you like, grab a plate of really good food, and just have fun.
Pressure is quite high. You want to spend as little as possible, but make everybody else think that you've spent lots.
1 in 10 weddings is now alcohol-free, which is kind of surprising.
We don't tell any of the guests until afterwards, and at the end we say, by the way, you've all just eaten food that would have gone to waste.
I love rich fruitcake, and I think if you have a wedding without a fruitcake, really, what's the point?
Wedding food, one of the biggest costs of the big day. I should know, I got married last summer. Welcome to the food programme with me, Jaega Wise. In this episode, we're celebrating wedding food. We'll be looking at trends and traditions and the impact the pandemic and the cost of living crisis have had on the sector.
Hello, Hitched. And so this is where obviously you enter the office. This is our kind of ideation area. You can see in this meeting room here, we like to brainstorm on the walls, things like that. And then round here, we're coming in.
We've come to the offices of Hitched in central London. It's an online platform where couples can plan their wedding. It's been going for more than 20 years. Zoe Burke is the editor and something of an expert when it comes to wedding trends.
So we did a survey every year. We do the National Wedding Survey. We polled around 2,500 couples on what they spent on their weddings, and the average cost was £18,400 last year. The average wedding has 81 guests and they spend £70 per person on catering. So that comes in at £5,670 on catering.
So a huge amount of the budget, really. What are some of the trends that you're seeing in terms of the food people are having at their weddings?
It's definitely become more relaxed. One thing I'll say about wedding food trends is they have been quite slow to change over the years. Usually something becomes popular and it stays that way for a long time. But post-pandemic, we're seeing a big boom in wedding food, particularly things like catering trucks, more relaxed casual food and food experiences. So there's a lot of venues out there that will offer a bit more theatre with your food. For example, the asado fire pits, where you can have your meat roasted over an open fire for your guests to see before it's served to you. Or hatches that open up and do things like churros or pizza for people to come and collect. It's become much more of an experience to be catered for at a wedding.
So what kind of food trucks are you seeing at weddings?
There's a huge range. Things like taco trucks, pizza trucks, hot dog stands that will come and serve up hot dogs. But we're also seeing across the world, you know, in the Far East recently, in Indonesia, I believe it was, McDonald's launched a wedding catering package where for something crazy like £110, you could get 100 cheeseburgers to be served at your wedding.
What about drinks trends?
So there's two extremes for drinks trends, actually. We've noticed over the past couple of years now, 1 in 10 weddings is now alcohol-free, which is kind of surprising. But on the flip side of that, we are seeing people having cocktail hours. You know, that 90% that are still drinking are looking for something different.
If you get invited to a wedding, you expect a bit of booze, really. How does a teetotal wedding work?
I'll be honest, when I first heard of this trend, that was my first thought, like, how does this work? But you can be really creative with it. So actually, my partner's cousin got married in a teetotal wedding last year, and they were really creative with it. You know, they made sure there was plenty of entertainment, great food. They had a poutine truck to align with his Canadian sort of background. Yeah, it's chips and cheese and gravy, essentially. They had a ceilidh, and they said that one of the reasons they did that was because you don't really need to be tipsy to get into that dancing spirit. You've got someone calling out and telling you what to do.
Tearing up the seating plan and serving guest festival-style food seems to be a trend that's growing. Producer Rebecca Rooney invited herself to one such wedding.
There's a delicious smell wafting across the cobbles of a side street in the centre of Bristol, and I have just gate-crashed the wedding of my colleague and fellow food programme producer Sam Grist, who's just got married to Seren.
Hello there. Hey, what can I get you? So we've got 3 types of tofu. We've got the black bean chili, Korean chili, and lemongrass.
I will go for Korean chili, please.
Korean chili, 2
Can I have Korean as well?
3 Korean chilies.
Guests are tucking into bowls of really colourful food. Mike and Josh, who are serving them, specialise in festival food.
I'm Mike. I'm one of the members of Wok and Roll, which is a street food stall that me and Josh started in April 2022.
And you've got your gas burners set up, you've got your woks, and what's on the wedding menu today?
Right, we're doing a vegan menu today, so we're doing fried tofu. Got 3 different marinades. Going to be serving that over seasoned rice with some stir-fried garlic greens, some cucumber kimchi that I've made specially for the event as well. It's street food. You're not sat down. I think it lends itself to the type of wedding event that a slightly more low-key, casual sort of event.
So I'm Josh. I'm the other co-owner of Wok and Roll. Street food is definitely on the up in general anyway. It's massively popular in like a lot of cities, Bristol especially. We've had quite a few bookings for weddings now, so yeah, I think it's definitely coming into fashion.
And how many guests have you got to feed tonight?
About 70. Yeah.
65, 70. But there's always a few people that come for seconds, isn't there? So.
Well, I will let you get on with service. You've got a lot of hungry guests to feed, and have a good evening.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Cheers.
It is absolutely delicious, yeah. Definitely seems more interesting than most wedding food, I think.
I like the more informal nature of it and not having a sit-down meal. I think it's quite nice that we can all just be out here and bump into each other and have a nice chat while we eat this.
I would happily eat this outside of a wedding.
Does it taste as good as it looks?
Yes, it tastes delicious.
Would you get this kind of food at weddings in America?
My sister just got married in Nashville, and she did pizza, which I thought was a very smart thing to do because everyone could also come up and grab it as they wanted to. We were talking about how much it can be kind of annoying when you're at the part of the wedding where you're sitting down and you're waiting for your food to be served to you, and it's like kind of this weird lull in the energy. It makes it much more nice than everyone has their assigned seats. Maybe you're sitting next to someone you don't really want to talk to, but like this way you can come up and just like continue to talk to your friends and family without like disrupting the flow.
So many couples want food served with a dollop of drama. I've come to meet a couple who are getting married soon, and we're better of a place to discuss their wedding plans than over a drink in their local, which happens to be a beautiful 800-year-old hotel in the historic town of Malmesbury. For Leslie and Martin, food is a really big part of this celebration. What's the plan?
So we're going to the Isle of Wight, just a small party of 10 of us, close family, and we're getting married at the George Hotel. And then we're going afterwards to a place called The Hut for a meal.
Well, we're getting transported to The Hut on a lovely yacht.
And then back the next day for a celebration party in the evening.
6 o'clock?
Yeah, so 6 o'clock. We've got a steel band.
Stilt walker, jugglers, and the outdoor theatre cooking will be set up in the courtyard, and guests will be able to kind of like, start to smell and see what's happening with the lambs being butterflied over charcoal and salmon sides on cedar planks and etc. So we have that.
You're being quite generous with your wedding in terms of the amount you're spending. Why did you choose to do that?
We've been together for 7+ years, so. And we're a little bit older maybe than, your average young person getting married, so we're kind of able to do that. But equally, what we are doing is we've asked everyone for wedding gifts to make a donation to a local charity instead of, because if we're going to be this decadent and we spend this much, we want some money to go back into.
It's down to the chefs to provide not just the food, but a bit of entertainment too. If you get one or even 2 wedding invites in the course of a summer, it's a treat, a real joyful thing. But Sue and Andy Wearing attend more wedding receptions in 1 year than most of us in a lifetime. They run a catering business and we're in their prep kitchen in North Wiltshire. How many weddings do you do a year?
I think, it varies. The most I think we've ever done is 54, which was a bit challenging. I think we're generally around 30 currently.
30, 35.
Yeah.
And then we have corporate in between, or may have some corporate as well.
And what about trends? So what are you seeing couples wanting food-wise on their big day?
Feasting, sharing, relaxed, more social, I think. Definitely it's changed in the last few years. Not too formal. Yeah. And even if people are sat down, I think they do like the sharing element. It just develops more chatter in the room. It makes for a very friendly, relaxed wedding, actually, doesn't it?
Okay, so what's on the menu this weekend?
Friday, we've got a gluten-free and vegan wedding.
And what about Saturdays?
They've got barbecue to table, aren't they? Yeah. So barbecue-style food, but they don't want guests to be coming up to barbecue, so we're doing it on sharing boards. Again, nice. Relaxed grazing.
We're doing a barbecue in front of guests during reception.
Yeah.
We'll cook out front, which is always quite nice because you have a bit of a chat with people.
And you're on the show.
Yeah.
That's right.
I have to be on my best behaviour.
And then they're having wood-fired pizza in the evening. So again, showy, we'll set up the wood-fired oven and hand stretch the dough, make all our own dough, hand stretch the dough, top it, and guests come up, 4 or 5 flavours, cut into 8s, and they just keep coming.
So what's the aim of the game?
Hit it as hard as you can.
Get it in the hole.
Okay.
Yeah. Stand back. For many couples, the local pub with a spread in the back room is a good option for a wedding celebration. I'm here in Chippenham to meet a young couple who are doing something similar. Paige and Callum with their son Theo. They'll be having their wedding reception at the golf club where they met.
Oh, there we go. That's the buffet menu, if you want to have a look.
Yes.
Do you want to have a look at what they offer? There's
Scott, I spoke to Scott.
Yeah.
He said normally it's £850, £11 a head, but he's knocked £100 off.
Yeah. So. Cool. Sounds good. Well done.
I'm going to go down.
That's even less money than what I thought.
Excellent. So what's on the menu?
Pork and leek sausage rolls, the sweet chilli prawns, samosas, honey glazed sausages, which are really nice as well. I've had them before. Mozzarella sticks with spicy tomato sauce, spring rolls, cheese and onion quiche, mini Scotch eggs and pork pies. So me and Callum met here. We worked here for a few years together when we got together. Callum's best friend happens to be the chef, which is really beneficial. Half the members here will probably be invited. So for us, it was kind of like a no-brainer. So we've decided to go a little bit more relaxed, have a buffet. It is cheaper as well, so we can have more people come. And the good thing about the buffet as well is we can supply a few bowls of fruit if we want to just add to it ourselves without having to pay him for it. So he said he's more than happy for us to bring a few extra bags of crisps or bowls of watermelon.
I got married myself last summer, and I was quite shocked by how, when you put the word wedding in front of anything you're buying, just how the price just kind of seems to go up.
Yeah, I must say I was probably tempted to lie and just say it was like a birthday party or a christening or something, and just when I would turn up in a white dress might give it away. But if you go out for a table of 10 for a party, it's 200-300 quid, but then as soon as you say that there's a wedding, no matter the size, it's tripled. It's almost like a white wedding tax when you say those words, so yeah.
Do you feel a bit of pressure in terms of the wedding and the food and the drink?
Yeah, the pressure for the day is quite a lot, but I'm trying to tell myself that it's my day and just to relax and actually enjoy it. But pressure is quite high. Again, with the money, you want to spend as little as possible, but make everybody else think that you've spent lots. So otherwise,
So the perception is important.
Yeah. I just wish it was a little bit more if people want to have a cheap, small wedding, they can. There shouldn't be such a stigma around it, but there is,
The latest figures on weddings from the Office for National Statistics showed that in 2020, the number of people getting married in England and Wales dropped to an all-time low because of the coronavirus restrictions. And as we've reported a lot on the food programme, the pandemic and the cost of living crisis have had long-lasting effects on the food industry. With all that to contend with, as a caterer, how do you quote for a wedding that may be 1 or 2 years away? Sue Waring.
Andy recosts after every job. So like we've done the job at the weekend, he will put in all the real costs, and that also is hugely helpful because then you actually see whether you're getting it right or not.
We've got a lot in for 24, we've got some in for 25, and at the moment we're just saying to couples, this is our best guess. And we generally quote it quite expensive and tell them we'll bring it down if we can, but it has been difficult. It's been difficult with power and food cost. Obviously, for us, food cost has gone through the roof.
Couples are still finding ways to have the wedding they want. Online magazine editor Zoe Burke again.
Yeah, costs are definitely a consideration. Although I will say in the survey we did, 70% of couples said they weren't impacted by the economy when it came to planning their wedding. I think weddings are a thing that people will save up for and invest in because it's a once-in-a-lifetime thing. It's a big experience. So they might cut back in other areas or perhaps have a smaller guest list perhaps to enable them to have the wedding that they imagined.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I can have that as well.
Yeah.
That's brilliant, thank you.
Our quest for wedding food has brought us to a big warehouse in Leeds. Inside the warehouse is a supermarket where shoppers are browsing and seeing what's on offer. And there's a lot to choose from. There's tinned carrots, peas, flour, beetroot, bread. And we're here because the food programme listener Jane Fontana got in touch to tell us about the organisation which runs this place. It's called Surplus to Purpose, and it caters for weddings too. It was set up by chef Adam Smith. He's campaigning to stop food waste.
So this is our walk-in freezer. We get things in like this, which is broccoli came in, it was on its last legs, there was tons of it, and it was about to go in the bin. Now we would have had to throw this away, so we've frozen it and then we give it out to people frozen so that we can rescue it as much as we can. We have things in like butter, cheese. So we are one of the biggest environmental social enterprises that intercepts surplus food that is destined not fit for sale. And then we intercept that food and we redistribute that food. Everything you see is surplus for lots and lots of different reasons. And we're not a charity, we're not a food bank, so we don't need the food. We don't request food, we don't ask for donations of food. We intercept waste. So everything you see here would have gone into landfill or would have gone to an incinerator. And we stop it and we try to prove that this food is still safe to consume if we make it into something which is accessible to the public.
So I hear that you cater to weddings.
I don't really know how it started. I mean, 10 years ago, started this project in Melbourne back in 2012, brought it to the UK. Had cafes, restaurants, and it just seemed kind of like a natural progression where I was able to cater large amounts. But I must have done between 30 and 40 weddings, I think, now. And it's got to the point that when we did one and we put it on social media, we went, look at us, we're just feeding a bride and groom with waste. How good are we? So we were like, actually, the demographic of people that might go to weddings might not know about projects like this or what they could do to help stop food waste. So we thought it was a whole new demographic of people we could tap into. So now, and at the end of the wedding, they want me to do a speech where we don't tell any of the guests until afterwards. And at the end, we say, by the way, you've all just eaten food that would have gone to waste. Then people are shocked to going, how are you able to do all this with that food? Why was that food being thrown away? They start questioning it all then.
How much would it cost a couple compared to hiring a professional wedding caterer?
So we always go for the price where we don't want to discourage people to not get us, but we don't want people to compare us as a cheap caterer as well. So generically, it's around between £10 and £15 a head. But if they were to go out and pay for the food that we were to deliver them, they would never be able to get anywhere near that. Because we've got like quinoa salads, or like I said, we've got sea bass on the menu, the quality of the food would be a lot less if you compared the prices. So it's not cheap because we don't want it to be cheap. We're trying to stop waste.
How does a wedding catered for with surplus food even work for a couple getting married? I'm off to meet Rooney and Seth, who got married this year and whose reception was catered for with surplus food.
Hello. Hi. Hello. Welcome. Come on in. I'm Seth Seagraves, married to Matthew over here.
And that's me. Everyone knows me as Rooney, though, babe. So,
Yeah, true.
Anyway. So we got married at the Civic Hall, a small group of people, about 30 people. And then we had our reception at an old converted church called Left Bank, which do a lot of community events. So we did that, and we had a Dolly Parton tribute act.
Very fun.
And then we walked down the aisle and did a little fake ceremony there to the Sister Act theme with my friend dressed as a nun. Yeah, it was different.
It was high camp, I think is what it was. It was
Yes.
very high camp and lots of colour, lots of sparkles. So it was a real sort of sit wherever you like, introduce yourselves to whoever you like, grab a plate of really good food and just have fun.
And I give you the Messrs. Seagraves.
And what did you have to eat?
So we didn't find out until the actual day itself. So when we eventually got to the venue, well, the food was fantastic. I mean, we'd left the food in the capable hands of Adam at Surplus to Purpose, and he came to us with the nice surprise that Donna Summer were catering the event. They're a Leeds-based vegan kebab shack kind of place. There was huge trays of food. I mean, several main dishes in these really big, long trays. These big, fantastic salads with loads of fruits and vegetables and things in and around that.
Normally a couple spends a lot of time agonising over the menu. How did you let go? You put a lot of trust in them.
We did. It was, I think, probably a definite risk.
I disagree because we'd known they'd done a lot of good. We've used them before through the Too Good To Go app, I think. And we'd had a good experience with that. So it wasn't a blind leap. I had faith.
And quite nice as well. I mean, you'd think it would be quite stressful not knowing what the menu was going to be and having it all planned out, but it was almost a bit refreshing to relinquish that stress in a way. I mean, I think for two full-time working guys who really don't want to have to be thinking about which way we want the salmon cooked at the wedding, it was actually quite nice to just hand that over to somebody else who has some really good reviews and let them do all the work, basically. It was lovely.
Yeah, and definitely the fact that food wasn't going to waste was a huge plus for me.
Yeah.
Adam told us that people often don't know that the food has come from surplus food. I mean, what was your guest reaction like?
Well, I think initially they were really intrigued to know what it was all about.
It was quite inspiring, wasn't it? Some people, well, I know I was in the headiness of the day. I'm like, right, I'm inspired now. I can't believe they made a Waldorf salad from food waste. So yeah, I think they were inspired. I hope they were anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've got a lot of family and friends as well who, especially these days, are a lot more eco-conscious as well. So I think it says a lot about the couple to be, I suppose, in the choice of caterers that you come for. On the whole, people really loved the idea and thought it was just a really good thing to do and break with tradition.
Tradition is something Dr. Annie Gray knows all about. She's a food historian. I asked her why the food at a wedding is so often called a wedding breakfast, even though it's rarely served in the morning.
Well, there's lots of theories about why it's called the wedding breakfast, but the basic reason is that until the 1930s, British weddings legally had to be held before 12 noon. Another reason is that breakfast was applied to all meals attached to weddings, certainly from the 1830s onwards. So by the time you get to kind of weddings really hitting popular culture, the wedding breakfast is just the generic name given to things. And the other reason, I think, is because breakfasts, when they started to develop as the kind of big British breakfast in the 19th century. Quite big, lots of buffet food, quite informal, quite kind of cool, and a wedding breakfast carried with it a certain connotation of jollity, which kind of fitted the occasion.
Were the bride and groom always expected to feed everyone?
The bride and groom did feed everybody with a lot of wedding feasts, but it really did depend on class. So for an awful lot of history, if you were rich, you would throw a party at any given opportunity to show off your status, to show off your generosity. Further down the social scale, there would be feasts, but of course they were quite expensive. So you had this thing called penny weddings, especially in Scotland, where people would effectively pay a fee to come to the wedding, and they became quite sort of free-for-all. So pretty much anyone would turn up, pay a bit of money, and that money would go towards the food and drink, and then anything that was left over, the bride and groom would be able to take home to set up house.
What about the showy centrepiece, the wedding cake? We can smell lemons.
Yes, I've just started making some lemon curd.
Oh,
and I've made brownies this morning and salted caramel. Yeah. Come on this way.
Tucked away on an industrial estate in Tetbury is the kitchen of Anna Baker from Gloucestershire, who makes cakes for a living. She'll make them for any occasion, but do couples still choose the big wedding cake, or a wedding cake at all?
So we're just going to whisk the sugar and the eggs. So this lemon curd is going into a lemon and raspberry cake. The 4-tier wedding cake this week, the top 2 tiers is lemon and raspberry cake, which is lemon sponge, lemon buttercream, lemon curd. The bottom layers are salted caramel and then carrot, orange and cinnamon cake.
Okay, goodness. So what happened to the traditional fruit cake at a wedding?
So I have had a few orders of fruit cakes, but not so far this year. People just want the sponge cake. It's basically covered in buttercream, so it can either be fully covered in buttercream, or it can be this kind of naked, semi-naked look, which is either has no buttercream on the outside of the cake, or has a very thin layer of buttercream.
The old tradition of a 3 or 4-tier wedding cake and the top tier being used for the christening later on, is that a tradition you've come across?
It doesn't seem to be so popular, but I have had a few people requesting me to basically recover their top tier.
Food historian Dr. Annie Gray says cakes have been part of wedding traditions for centuries.
There's always been a focus on a cake. In the Roman period, you got a cake, as it were, of wheat or barley that might be broken over a bride's head. Yeah, I think it's lovely, the idea of smashing a barley cake and chucking it at everybody. And in the medieval period, again, it wasn't quite a fruit cake as we'd know it, an enriched bread, I would say, with lots of fruit in, sometimes some eggs, spices, that kind of thing. Very much a way of showing off because they were quite expensive. That then developed in the 17th century into a thing called a plum cake, which is much more like the rich fruit cake that we associate with Christmas and with very traditional weddings today. And then in the 18th century, that got marzipan and icing. Sometimes there were things hidden inside it, rings, thimbles, coins. If you found the thimble, you were going to be a spinster your whole life. Coin was wealth, the ring, you were going to get married, those kind of things. Queen Victoria had an enormous wedding cake, 3 metres round, described almost universally as quite ugly, actually. And then, of course, she had 9 children and thousands of grandchildren, and all of those cakes were reported on in the news. So it was really through the royal family that people got this idea that it shouldn't just be a cake, a plain uniced cake with ceremony attached to it, but should be this big iced marzipan thing with sugar on.
Do you think it's the death of the wedding fruit cake?
I think it is. I mean, in a personal level, I think that's a terrible, terrible thing because I absolutely love rich fruit cake and I will eat it at every occasion. And I think if you have a wedding without a fruit cake, really, what's the point?
Cake aside, Zoe Burke says our wedding priorities have shifted.
The pandemic drove a little bit of a reset when it came to weddings. People were desperate to connect and celebrate with their loved ones, and they missed that experience. And these are people now getting married who most likely got engaged in the pandemic, and they want everybody around for as much as possible to make the most of it.
You've been listening to The Food Programme, presented by Jaega and produced for BBC Audio in Bristol by Rebecca Rooney.